How are we doing, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and as we covered yesterday, I've recently went ahead and updated my rankings on sizzlefantasy.com for 2022 fantasy football. Obviously updating that draft guide content for you guys. And after that, I kind of went through and compared it to the previous edition of rankings I had, and I decided to make a couple of videos about players who've been rising up my rankings as of late here in July, and players who have been sliding down those rankings lists. Yesterday, we covered the players that ended up skyrocketing up and moving a few places up that draft board, and today we'll be covering the players who are some of my biggest fallers down the draft boards, guys who have seen their ADP slip as well, and all that great stuff. So if you guys are new around here, make sure to drop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a piece of content here. We're posting 4 to 5 videos per week at minimum here on YouTube, and we're posting daily Weddle episodes and daily player profiles on TikTok. So go check that stuff out. Check out some of the links in the description of today's video, and let's get right into our first player. Of course, you guys, as always, if you're interested in a draft guide for this season, scan that QR code in the top right-hand corner of your screen. That'll take you over to our pricing page on sizzlefantasy.com, and you can see the 3 different ways that you can get yourself access to those draft guides for the season. My sleepers, busts, must-own players in rounds 1 through 20, over 300 player profiles with my top 60 rookies included on top of that. We've got everything from pros and cons of situations to dynasty trade values, injury histories, and all the other pertinent information that you guys need to know. Weekly articles going up on there, all kinds of stuff. You guys can go check that stuff out for yourself. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the first player we're talking through today. Unfortunately, I did have my hopes up earlier in May and early June of this offseason, but again, this rankings update was not so kind to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who has slipped down to my RB28 overall on the board. I previously had him on the fringe of being a high teens running back and a player I had at the high 20s. Or I guess you would consider that to be the low 20s, you know, like the RB 21, 22 positions. I was steadily moving him back here over the past couple of weeks, and I really went ahead here and just dropped him down. The main reasoning for doing so is we already had our pre-established concerns with CEH and exactly what his ceiling was for fantasy football, because obviously we know the limitations on the goal line. You've got yourself a player who is 5'8", 207 pounds. So that's not going to be a guy that we're going to see get this immense goal line usage. This is a player that has a very niche role in this Kansas City offense, and that's simply to go out and put your best foot forward as a pass catcher and be very efficient in that phase of things, contribute at a high level in the PPR phase of fantasy football. But now, I had my extra, opportunities where CEH could take that step forward in this offense, my extra and, optimism, you could say, for why exactly I thought he would hit on his upside here. And for a while, his ADP was giving us fantastic value. It was a great opportunity for us to invest in him as an RB3, as someone who had legitimate potential to be a PPR RB2, meaning a top 24 asset in our in our 12-team league. So the reasoning, again, that CEH has kind of fallen off the cliff is, I've kind of come back to reality here. I've kind of come off of that high of those expectations. One of the main things that kind of triggered that response for me was the Jerick McKinnon reunion here in Kansas City, bringing him back for another season. And while the box score numbers and the raw stats from a season ago don't jump off the paper and jump off the page, indicate that McKinnon was a super valuable asset to this team, the eye test and the things that I was seeing him do for this offense, the role that he was playing down the stretch, was actually showing me that in stretches, he was being favored over CEH in this lineup. And now CEH had more touches. He was effective in some of those playoff games that Kansas City played this year. He had a couple nice plays against the Bengals. However, the pass-catching role that Jerick McKinnon was playing is definitely concerning to what CEH's ceiling as a pass catcher is for this team. There was a period of time prior to all of the free agent acquisitions after Tyreek Hill had been immediately shipped out of house here that I was considering the fact that Clyde could potentially start to see some spillover and absorb some of those wide receiver opportunities. But now with how bullish I am on Juju Smith-Schuster, with how high I am on Sky Moore and everything that he brings to the table, there's only really realistically 159 targets opened up by Tyreek Hill's departure if you just take the raw number he had last season and carry that over here to 2022. I don't really think that there's going to be that much extra opportunity that Clyde wasn't seeing last season that he's now going to be seeing. Because if you literally divide that number straight down the middle, you're only talking about 79.5 targets to split between Juju and Sky Moore. Juju's the veteran player, so he'll probably have the higher share of that, whatever. We can discuss that in another video. I'm very high on both of those players. I think they've got really nice opportunity at their respective draft positions. But the point here is that this stuff is not good news for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So now if you tell me that you have to continue competing with Jerick McKinnon, a player of very similar skills and attributes out there on the field, and you have to start kind of divvying up and sharing those running back passing game opportunities. Again, McKinnon's passing game numbers aren't that awesome last year. That's not what I'm saying. But when he got out in space, when Mahomes was checking the football down to him, it really seemed like they tapped into a side of their offense they weren't able to find previously in the season when they weren't doing that type of thing. So you've also got that presence of Ronald Jones. I think he's going to take a lot of the short yardage situational work here and be definitely their lead opportunity back on the goal line in terms of seeing the highest volume of red zone touches this coming season for this offense. And overall, it's just been kind of one small thing after the next that has, gradually shifted me back towards the negative side of the spectrum for CEH this season. And I am no longer as bullish on him as finishing as a top 24 player as I was earlier in the offseason. Now, Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns, this is another player who has absolutely shot down my rankings. This is somebody that at the initial onset of the Deshaun Watson trade, I couldn't help myself but ranking him as my wide receiver 12. When you see the things that Deshaun Watson has been able to do with Amari Cooper, or excuse me, they have not played a game yet. When you see the types of things that Deshaun Watson has been able to do for his lead wide receiver, regardless of that's DeAndre Hopkins or Will Fuller in 2020, the last time we saw him play a full football season, it's been absolutely spectacular. He made Will Fuller the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game during that season without D-Hop on the field. It was, obviously that Bill O'Brien boneheaded trade that everyone loved to joke about at the time. He made Will Fuller, going from the wide receiver 2 role in that offense to stepping up and being the guy. He turned him into the wide receiver 8. Will Fuller is currently unemployed. He is currently still on the streets. Had a very awful prove-it season with the Dolphins, riddled with injuries. Obviously wasn't out there on the field that much. I believe he had the suspension, and then he might have came back and played like a game or two, and then he broke his hand or something. I forget exactly what it was. But moral of the story is that Will Fuller is no longer a very relevant fantasy commodity. Amari Cooper as a talent is a phenomenal route runner, someone that we think of very highly in terms of his overall athleticism and ability to stretch the field. He's very explosive. He has great straight line speed. And again, his route running is very, very pristine. It's actually it's really interesting to watch his footwork and exactly what he brings to the table. Now, the last couple of seasons, he's been kind of gridlocked into that timeshare, or not a timeshare because it's not a running back system here, but he's been sharing targets and opportunities with CeeDee Lamb, and it's really prevented one receiver or the other from truly asserting themselves as the top 12 option. It's kind of made situations where in given weeks, one receiver will kind of defer to the other, and that other receiver will have the big game. But it was a big issue for consistency. Now that Amari was finally becoming that wide receiver 1 for the first time since, I believe it was 2018 when Dallas initially traded for him and made him the first top option in that Dallas receiving core, that was going to be the type of opportunity I was projecting and expecting for Cooper this season. Now, however, he went from my wide receiver 12 to now we have all of this muddy circumstances and this ugly situation with the Deshaun Watson suspensions, and we've got rumors that he won't be suspended. We've got rumors that the bare minimum is an entire season. We've got everything in between. There's so much to sift through here. There's so much risk in investing into the situation. Cooper at one point was a must-own player for me in the 5th round. It was an easy draft capital smash, someone that you needed to get your hands on, and someone that was going to be a huge return on investment. Now, if you're telling me that Amari Cooper, and actually we have a telling sign, somewhat telling. You know what? We're going to put context behind it here because that's what we do here at SFS. I don't just throw out mumbo-jumbo at you guys or just, chalk things up under assumption. We'll talk about what the Browns just did within the last day or so here in a second. Before we get to that, though, if Deshaun Watson is suspended and you're telling me that I have to have Jacoby Brissett throwing footballs to Amari Cooper, it will be a complete fantasy meltdown and a fantasy disaster. Again, that's what made him go from being a fringe wide receiver 1 for me to now a wide receiver 3 at my wide receiver 28 position. Again, for those of you who are somewhat newer to the fantasy space, you've got 12 guys in your leagues, right? 1 through 12 at a position are going to be your number ones, your starters, if you will. Your 13 through 24, that next grouping of 12 will be kind of your bench players or your wide receiver 2s in this case, although they will still be in your starting lineups because of, most fantasy leagues are starting 2 running backs, 2 receivers, etc. Your 25 through 36 will be the 3s, so on and so forth, in groupings of 12. If you're playing in a 10-team format, you do the same exact thing, but with 10s. If you're playing in an 8-man format, so on and so forth, you get the point here. So, essentially, Cooper saw easily the most massive drop-off of anyone on my rankings from heading all the way down, 16 positions to the wide receiver 28 spot. But I just can't feel comfortable with the situation knowing that Jacoby Brissett, who is someone who I've joked about having some Jameis Winston in him, they're both these fairly large, decent athletes that just have this awkward kind of movement to them. They're both just, they'll chuck that ball up there and give a 50-50 opportunity on any given snap. There's just something about their demeanor when I'm watching them play that's very reminiscent of one another. There's some gunslinger in them, but they're not necessarily the most... it's not that they're not skilled. Jameis is definitely the better player than Jacoby, but besides the point, the overall message here is that you don't want Jacoby Brissett trying to lead an offense for your fantasy football wide receiver. That move that I was talking about and was briefly touching on here is the fact that they signed Josh Rosen. They brought in yet another quarterback. Why is that telling? Well, it kind of tips the hand that maybe they're just trying to load up that quarterback room and get other options in-house, preparing for a lengthy Deshaun Watson suspension. They're, saying, hey, we might need another guy if Jacoby Brissett goes down. We might need to plan for the worst case scenario should something go against the way that we're hoping or expecting that it does. So it tips slightly in favor of concern and, obviously not favorable dynamics here in this Cleveland Browns situation. However, it is Josh Rosen. Infamously, what was he, the 10th overall pick, said there was 9 mistakes made before me. Actually, to this point in his career, Josh, there was about 200 mistakes made after you, if you will, for all those other players that got drafted after him, because he has been an absolute nightmare to this point in the draft, or at least in the aftermath of that draft class. He has not hit from the Cardinals to the Dolphins to he spent some time with Tampa Bay. He spent time on the 49ers practice squad. Now he's here with the Browns. I might be missing some places in between. He's had a lot of stops. His NFL career has not gained traction. So I would be especially concerned if Josh Rosen was the quarterback here for Amari Cooper. But overall, the point of me bringing that up is to show that it looks like there's increased urgency, desperation, and a lot of concern growing in Cleveland, and that is not something that I want to be a part of. So the final player we're talking through today, talking through 3 names, is Michael Carter of the New York Jets. Now, consensus has been fairly low on Michael Carter throughout the majority of this offseason. However, as the offseason has progressed, I have also progressed in my bullishness on Breece Hall. Breece Hall, for me, is someone who initially I had my concerns. Michael Carter was the lead back when healthy last season. Exactly how soon are they going to cut him loose, let him have that type of role for this offense? And then I really started to stack up the situation here. At first, my initial analysis was, Marlon Mack versus Jonathan Taylor 2020. Marlon Mack was expected and scheduled to be the starting running back for that team for that season. However, ever so unluckily, he ruptures his Achilles in week 1 and basically sets up Jonathan Taylor to be the lead back from that point going forward. After that point in time, you've got yourselves a situation where you see JT kind of struggling and whatnot, and then eventually they pull back his touch count a little bit. Then he takes off and is off on the ground running. So I initially kind of took that approach to things where I'm like, well, Michael Carter might be the starter until we're told otherwise, etc., etc. Then I went back and really was honest to myself because I've been higher on Michael Carter than consensus throughout the majority of last season. My argument was that he's the fresh legs in the backfield. He's a skilled pass catcher. He's going to come out here and contribute valuable touches in PPR lineups. But then you still have that size factor. The fact that Michael Carter is a 5'9". Yes, I was correct. I went snip, snap, back and forth. It is 5'8", 201 pounds. So not a workhorse is the moral of the story here. Marlon Mack in that Indianapolis situation was sized much better to be a lead back for an NFL offense. Michael Carter is a better comparison to going back to that Jonathan Taylor example where I was trying to compare Michael Carter to Marlon Mack in 2020. What I really should have compared Michael Carter to is Nyheim Hines in 2021. The situational pass-catching role for a smaller scat back. Again, the reason I kept getting those heights and weights mixed up here is because I have both Michael Carter and Nyheim Hines listed. Again, for those of you that are still confused by my flip-flopping of words here, Michael Carter listed 5'8", 201 pounds. Nyheim Hines, 5'9", 196 pounds. So a 5-pound difference, a 1-inch difference. This shows you that for two players who are actually pretty good and effective with the ball in their hands, they're still not big enough to be the lead back for an NFL offense and to carry the load, obviously, which is why we saw JT take over last season, finish as the RB1 because he's one of the most effective rushers of the football, scored 20 touchdowns, was an absolute menace. You get it. You get the point. 21 fantasy points per game, RB1 overall finish. For Breece Hall, I'm not saying he's going to finish as the RB1, but he absolutely has top 5, top 6, top 8 upside at the running back position. Michael Carter, to me, is going to end up being pigeonholed very early in the season into that situational pass-catching role. Every once in a while, he might get carries as a change of pace back. Again, he's shifty. He's explosive. He's someone that warrants touches and is very deserving of opportunity in this offense. However, it is going to be very limited in terms of the opportunity that is actually presented to him. There will be a sprinkled in element and dynamic of occasional running back by committee style offensive approach early in the season, potentially because of the 49ers coaching staff tree. Robert Saleh, although he does coach on the defensive side of the ball, I would argue and would assume will still have some say in how this offensive attack is run. So at the end of the day, essentially what it is for me, the reason that Michael Carter, I should have tossed this out earlier, is my running back 44 for this season, is simply because of the fact that I just don't think he has starting caliber traits when Breece Hall has entered into this fantasy situation. So you've got yourself, you can argue about it. We talked through Breece Hall last week. Is he a league-winning player? Is he not? Ultimately, yes, was the answer for that video. I am now ever so comfortable with drafting Breece in the 3rd round of my fantasy leagues for this season. So his value on my board is rising. Therefore, Michael Carter's pulling back a little bit here. I've come to terms with the situational role Michael should have in this offense, and that's why we're starting to pull off of him a little bit here for the 2022 season. So if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Make sure to like and click that subscribe button. If you're new around here, click that bell if you haven't done so already, so you're never late for an episode again. We're posting 4 to 5 videos at minimum. Next week, I want to start rocketing out some more mock drafts at a higher frequency and getting you guys some more content. I will probably post updated rankings videos next week to give you some insight into my draft strategy as it's evolved here through late July, and obviously get you guys heading into August, into prime draft season with all the information you need for this year. So thank you so much, you guys. Remember to go check out some of the links in the description of today's video. Scan that QR code, get yourself your draft guide for this year, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.